Hello, my name is John Tague. I'm the superintendent of schools, proudly serving the students of Fairfax, Fletcher, and Georgia. This particular video is to give an overview of the budget, constraints, and other things for the folks of Fairfax. So let's get started. So as we build a budget, we try to make sure that it's aligned with the district's goals, and we'll walk through those. So what we want is our students to show growth in their academic proficiency, and we want our students to meet the state's literacy goal by grade 3, which means they're reading on grade level. We try to support students and the community responsibly through a fiscally sound, voter-approved budget. So that's largely what this video is about. We monitor progress on the continuous improvement plan goals through the administrative presentations in September, December, and April. And if you look back to the last video, that's where we went through some of the data about the continuous improvement plan and our student progress, both academically and in all other areas. And finally, we want to engage the community by sharing school successes, discussing challenges, providing updates on state and national education issues. Those happen at board meetings every month, and also through some of these videos and outreaches that we've sent to you all. So there's things in the budget that put some pressure on the budget, and some that take pressure off the budget. So off the budget, just bear in mind that not everyone pays their school tax based on their property value, but there's income sensitivity, and nearly 2/3 of all households in the state get some form of income sensitivity that offsets some of their property tax bill. So it's not all about property tax in the state. A place that pressure was taken off the budget was in the increased pupil count. That's the long-term weighted average daily membership. Feel free to pause and go back and watch that video if you're not sure what that one's about. So, and finally, there is the potential. The governor has announced that he has put in his budget proposal an extra $105 million to the education fund that will potentially offset tax increases. So that's a promise that he's made. Where that comes through in the legislative process, maybe a bit too early to tell, but that is definitely a place that would take some pressure off the budget. On the budget, salaries and wages and benefits continue to rise, so not a surprise. And we did need to add a 0.5 FTE pre-K paraeducator that allows us to fully staff our pre-K program to serve students in 3 sessions a day, required by law. And then a place that put pressure on the budget was that our common level of appraisal decreased a little bit, and that certainly, as you have seen in some of the tax pieces, the CLA is a place that will change the tax rate, and if it goes down, that's a bad thing. Some things that we just have to bear in mind is that student behavior is becoming more challenging even at earlier grades. So that does require us to put additional supports in place for students, different behavior strategies, and so those add to the expense of the budget. There is an increased need for mental health resources to support students dealing with trauma, as funding for organizations like NCSS has decreased. That means we sometimes are in the position where we have to hire clinicians and other mental health supports to support students. So those are costs that show up in the education fund and in our education budget that may not have been there years ago. And we also know that increased costs are not sustainable for taxpayers in our current funding system. And we talked about that in the initial Vermont funding system video that you may or may not have watched, but it's still out there. So those are the challenges that your school board has faced as they're building these budgets. We've been working on this budget. We really start talking about the budget in July. We get rolling on it in August when we have our first meetings with boards or when we have a board retreat. And we typically start off with a level services budget and then revise it based on direction. And then we're really trying to figure out what's the best way to meet student needs and be responsive to taxpayers. We spend November through January trying to figure out what's the best plan moving forward. We adjust, we reduce, we start to get tax information. We then make some adjustments based on what the potential tax impact on our community members might be. And once the board approves the budget in January, we then start communicating with you all, and we hope that people turn out and vote. Whatever you decide to vote, it's really important that you do get out and vote so that we know where the community stands and we're able to make good decisions moving forward one way or the other. So what led to an increased budget? So not a surprise. I just mentioned the 0.5 FTE paraeducator. We needed to add that so that we could have the third preschool session. So required in a pre-K to have a paraeducator in with the classroom teacher while we're working with our littlest learners, youngest learners. Insurance premiums, they continue to go up. The average increase for insurance premiums was 7.3%. And again, health insurance is mandated through statewide bargaining. We don't get to determine the plans. We don't get to determine the rates. We don't get to determine the percent that our staff pay or that the board is responsible for. So that is a ongoing concern that we're hoping legislation maybe make some adjustments in the next year or so on that. But for right now, we had to just budget in that 7.3% increase. And the common level of appraisal, as I said, decreased. And that's just a measure of Fairfax property values relative to the rest of the state. So it's a constant adjustment. And there was about a 10% drop in that common level of appraisal. When the common level of appraisal decreases, then your tax rate has a increase associated with that. That's how we're spending the money in all of the areas. So you can see we spend vast majority of our funding on this elementary, secondary schools. And next chunks the debt service, which is the bond, and you can see all of the various pieces, special ed, FWSU services, which includes the work from my office as well as your general ed paras are included in that FWSU services area. So that's just the split of all the funding. Smaller changes to the budget. Transportation costs actually went down by about $100,000. The debt service, the bond payment dropped by about $51,000, and it'll continue to drop by about $51,000 a year for the next, whatever it is, 28 years that we're paying on the bond. Pre-K tuition, what we pay for people to tuition their preschool students to facilities outside of BFA Fairfax, that increased by about $48,000. And then we did see an increase in our line for subs, and we are actively pursuing a change in the way that we do our substitutes that will save some, if not all, of that increase as we look to do our substitutes in-house. So that's something that we're looking at for the start of the year, but not soon enough to actually make a change in the budget. So budget overview, these are the numbers. Total budget, $22,822,478. That's a 6.96% increase. Per pupil cost, $14,358.41. And that actually is down by 1.08%. Again, that's attributed to that increase in the long-term weighted average daily membership that we've talked about. That went up significantly, which dropped their per pupil cost. Top spending increases, talked about that, the salary and wages and benefits overall throughout the entire contract. We are largely we're paying for people. So that's going to be always our top spending increase. Contracted services, talked about that line item as a major increase that we're working to reduce as we move forward. Spending decreases, also talked about that, transportation costs down and debt services down. So that is what we have to say. It's kind of leaving you with a cliffhanger. The next video is the tax calculation and household impact. That's coming up. So you'll want to stay tuned for that. But that information is also out there in the mailer and on our website. And you can go back and see any of the other previous 3 videos to this one. Voting begins February 11th. That's already happened as I'm recording this video. Informational meeting is Saturday, February 28th, immediately following the town's presentation, which starts at 10 a.m. Voting day, Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, in the BFA Elementary School gym. Polls are open all day long from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You can request an early ballot if you're going to be out of town on March 3rd, or if family members are not going to be in town on March 3rd, registered voters. So please, we encourage you to vote. And please let us know if you have questions. Show up in the informational meeting, show up at a school board meeting, and or shoot an email to any of us. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.